Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we are back here doing an episode review for last night's episode of The Walking Dead. This was Season 7, Episode 13, entitled Bury Me Here. Now, to get right into things, alright, last night's episode was a Kingdom-only episode and a Carol, I guess, only episode as well. And the lead for this episode was definitely Morgan, and he absolutely killed it. This was the best Kingdom episode that we've seen yet, in my personal opinion, and I have no words that can really describe it other than the fact that we got to see crazy Morgan again, man. Like, we thought it was going to happen this episode, you know what I mean? There was rumors and everything like that floating around online about him choking out Richard because Richard is actually the one who got Ben killed, and that actually all ended up happening. So I'm kind of disappointed about the spoiler there, but at the same time, it was still a pretty big shock in the episode. Now, with that being said, I didn't think that Morgan would go full crazy. I didn't think it would really completely happen. You know, I thought that maybe the progress to it would happen, but he went full crazy. Like, full on batshit crazy Morgan, pre-Eastman, and it was just, it was an amazing episode. I really did like it. Props to Lenny James, man. He's such an amazing actor. He does Morgan such a great justice. And with that being said, everybody, let's go ahead and get into the episode review. So the episode actually started off with basically Carol and the sneak peek and, you know, the stuff that we've seen in last week's promo and, you know, the sneak peek for this week's episode of The Walking Dead was basically after the intro, you know, with basically like a flash forward of them putting a melon in a truck. It was very vague. We didn't really know what was going on there. But after that and after the whole intro, you know, scene, we got to see Carol basically walking down, or she originally woke up actually in her bed, and it looks like maybe she woke up from a nightmare or something, probably dreaming about something, hopefully, you know, hoping that everybody at her group was actually okay, and she just has this doubt about her, you know, she doesn't quite believe Daryl about everybody's okay. She's starting to put two and two together on, you know, if they really got all the saviors, and if they really put this deal together with the rest of them, then why did Richard come to Carol and basically ask her to, you know, help him get Ezekiel to join the fight against the saviors? You know what I mean? She's sort of putting two and two together, and she makes the decision to go to the kingdom. She finds Morgan after clearing out some walkers on the street. She had a moment with Ben there, which was pretty cool. That was all in the sneak peek. And she talked to Morgan, basically asked him, you know, if anything, you know, if everything was all right back at Alexandria, if everybody was okay, you know, the whole situation with the saviors, what's going on there. Daryl told me that everything was fine. And Morgan basically explains to her, you know, he puts it point blank to her, basically says, what was said between you and Daryl was said between you and Daryl, and you're going to have to go ask people at Alexandria. Now, if you want me to come with you to Alexandria right now to go ask them, I will. All right, he doesn't want to necessarily break the confidence between, you know, what Daryl told her, because he didn't break the confidence of what she told him to tell everybody else, which was, I left, you know what I mean? I'm off of my own, I left, you don't know where I am, and Morgan never broke that promise. Remember, Daryl found her on his own, or somewhat with the help of Richard, okay? But, you know, Morgan doesn't want to sort of break that confidence with Daryl. He doesn't feel like it's his place to tell her. He also doesn't want to send her off the deep end, which is probably a majority of the reason why he's sort of keeping it to himself. But by the end of the episode, he's off the deep end as well, and he actually ends up telling her about it, which I thought was a brilliant move, you know, on his part, and on the writer's part as well. I thought that it was a really good move. You know, he finally cracked, and he actually ended up choking Richard and killing him in the episode, because Richard, initially, you know, before the savior drop off, he ended up blocking the road for the kingdom, and he ended up hiding one of the melons, and that ended up getting, you know, him killed. Benjamin killed. That ended up getting Benjamin killed. And it was a freak accident, honestly. I think that I think the savior meant to just shoot him in the leg. It ended up hitting his like femoral artery, and he bled out. They took him to Carol's, and they couldn't save his life. You know, it's definitely a shit situation. And it hit Morgan hard. I mean, we can see that it hit him hard too, because when they actually went back to, you know, go ahead and provide them with the melon, you know, that they lost, he ended up eventually calling Benjamin Dwayne, which is obviously his son, that, we know that he lost somewhere between season 1 and season 3, episode 12, Clear. He lost somewhere, in between those timelines. And, that he called Benjamin Dwayne. He's, going through all these things in his head throughout the entire thing. Throughout the entire episode, we see like a mental breakdown from the moment he finds out that Richard is the one that basically got Ben killed. You know what I mean? From the moment he finds out that's when he snaps. And that's when all these things go through his head at once and just make him absolutely snap. And I mean, it's definitely not good, for anybody in his way. But at the same time, it's good for his character, and I enjoyed every single minute of it, man. I really did. Like I said, I didn't think he would go full-on psycho, but he definitely ended up doing it, and like I said, the actor killed it, man. Lenny James is just, he's amazing. So, anyways, what ended up happening throughout the entire episode in a nutshell, just to explain it quickly, because I actually don't have the most amount of time. I don't have a watch on, but I will look at my wrist. What actually ended up happening throughout the entire episode, in a nutshell, Richard got Benjamin killed because he initially thought that they would kill him, okay? They initially thought that he would be the one who was getting killed because of the misplaced melon, because they earlier told him, he explained to Morgan that they told him he would be the first to go, all right? It was always a grudge between him and that one savior. And, that's it. He thought that he was going to be the one to sacrifice himself for the good of the group, joining the fight with Rick, to fight the saviors, the kingdom, joining the fight, to fight them and to ultimately go to war. He wanted to be the human sacrifice to prove a point. Unfortunately, it ended up not being him, and he got Benjamin killed. Now, of course, that's entirely his fault, but at the same time, you know what I mean? If you really think about it, if you really compare and contrast these two situations of him unintentionally getting Benjamin killed and, let's say, Daryl unintentionally getting Glenn killed at the beginning of the season, where he stepped up, he punched Negan in the face, and that ended up being Glenn's demise right there, because he actually had to prove a point. He had to make sure that they knew their place, they were in line. But with that being said, if you really kind of think about it, it's sort of the exact same thing. Of course, Daryl didn't have to punch Negan, you know what I mean? He sort of snapped in a moment and made that decision because he wanted to fight back against the saviors. Richard didn't necessarily have to misplace that melon and hide it, and unfortunately get Benjamin killed in the process. He didn't have to do that, but he wanted to try to find a way to fight the saviors. Now, the key element within those two stories is the saviors being the bad guy, right? Being the villain, being the one who they ultimately want to rebel against, right? Now, with that being said, I'm not entirely blaming it on Richard that Benjamin died. I mean, I thought it was coming anyway, because that's the only way the kingdom is actually going to join the fight against the saviors. And we all know from the comic book that actually ends up happening. They join the fight. Now, with that being said, Ezekiel earlier said no to Rick. And, well, there had to be something that happened that changed the mind. In terms of the show, you know what I mean? In terms of us viewing the show, we know that something had to change. Something had to be done. In terms of Richard being entirely guilty for it, I don't think so, because he actually ended up getting the job done. They are going to fight with Rick, and with the Hilltop, the kingdom is joining the war. He's got his mission done. Unfortunately, he took a life along with his. Richard did end up dying. He ended up executing his plan of him, being a martyr and going out that way and dying like that. But he did it in a way that he didn't really expect to be doing it. He initially wanted to die. He wanted to be Benjamin, essentially. And he ended up killing Benjamin. And Morgan sort of saw an opportunity there to kill Richard for killing Benjamin who he really saw as his kid, essentially, like his son, almost. Like, well, I mean, you can just flat out see he called the guy Dwayne after he killed Richard. After, he was explaining to Ezekiel, why he killed Richard was because that, he essentially got Benjamin killed. He called him Dwayne, I mean, there's the connection right there between Benjamin and Dwayne. So with that being said, I don't necessarily agree with what Morgan did, but again, we seen him going through these flashbacks in his head, and, we seen him seeing the clear on the walls, and that's obviously, flashing back to season 3, which I thought was amazing. The work in that was great. It was wonderful. And we really got to believe that Morgan was really going through this and, really going crazy again. And I thought that it was amazing. Again, I can't iterate that enough, that I thought that was amazing. It really was. Like the work in those scenes with him going crazy and having these flashbacks and, screaming clear and, you don't and stuff like that. I thought that they were amazing, and I thought they were totally believable. And him choking Richard out as well, just being frustrated after Richard started to execute his plan of telling the Saviors, we understand, why you did what you did, and we will be better from here on out. Now, I think Morgan also took that as an opportunity because they just killed one of his own people, right? The Saviors killed one of their own people. So if Richard just all of a sudden goes up to them and be like, we understand, that's not necessarily going to be completely believable. So I think Morgan also took that as an opportunity to kill him in front of the Saviors, exacting this revenge, for him essentially getting Benjamin killed. But at the same time, after he did that, after he choked him out, Richard, which, by the way, that was complete rage. You know what I mean? You don't kill somebody with your bare hands, just like they said on Talking Dead, if it's not complete rage. And that was a way of getting, some of this rage that he's built up now out. After all these months and all these, maybe even a year of not killing anyone, no matter what, there had to be something building up. You know what I mean? And he finally gets to extract that on Richard. He kills him, but as soon as he does that, he stands up and does exactly what Richard was going to do, saying, we understand, we understand, the rules of what's going on here. He is the one that tried to instigate a fight between the kingdom and the Saviors by taking the melon out and hiding it. We understand. We don't want this to happen, and we're totally on board with everything that we have to do. We know what we need to do in order to be on good terms with you. And he just goes on to explain that the drops, in the coming weeks and everything like that will go off, no questions asked, smoothly, okay? And I think that was a better way of doing it than what Richard was trying to do there. Because, it's the exact same thing Richard was trying to do, but it came from a point of not really being able to believe him. You know what I mean? They just killed his friend, and he was about to just pledge allegiance to them. After all these weeks of them being, in constant tension, sorry, couldn't say that, with the Saviors, especially Richard, it's kind of hard to believe that he would just all of a sudden pledge allegiance. You know what I mean? So I think Morgan also took that maybe that opportunity. I could be totally overlooking it, though. Maybe it was just spontaneous, but I would like to think that that would be more believable than what Richard was trying to do, if you know what I'm saying. So anyways, after that, he explained to Ezekiel, after they all left, after the Saviors left, he explained to Ezekiel that he's the one that got him killed and everything like that. And Ezekiel noticed that Morgan was going through something right now, and he basically said, Morgan, you can't be alone right now. Come on, let's go. And Morgan snapped, basically said, I can't go on right now. I can't go home. Just go. I have to stay out here a little while. He ended up burying Richard where Richard wanted to be buried, where it said, bury me here. He ended up burying Richard there. And after that, we get to see a really cool, sick montage of Morgan, quote unquote, clearing, just absolutely killing every single walker that he could with the stick, with the Aikido stick. I think, in a way, trying to get back to his way of not killing, sort of trying to convince him in a way that he did what he did because he had to, in a way. He's just basically trying not to go crazy. I don't think that he's ever going to go back to the whole, not killing anybody no matter what, all life is precious bullshit. You know what I mean? But I think that he's trying to do this Aikido thing with the walkers because he doesn't want to completely, revert back to old season 3 Morgan where he was absolutely batshit crazy and killed everybody. You know what I mean? So with that being said, after the whole montage with the walkers, he went over to Carol's place. He ended up telling her that he killed Richard, and he wanted to ask her if she wanted to know what happened to Alexandria. He had told her that Negan actually is Negan killed Glenn, and he killed Abraham. He beat them over the head with a baseball bat, and definitely an emotional scene right there, watching Carol sort of come to that realization of, maybe this wouldn't have happened, if I didn't go off on my own and listen to Morgan and, do all this no killing stuff. I don't think that she necessarily blames herself, for what happened to Glenn and Abraham, but she knows now that she has to fight, which is why she goes to the kingdom. But not before telling Morgan to stay at her little cottage there, because Morgan was actually going to go off and kill every single last one of them. Now, what I'm not really clear on is, was he talking about walkers? Was he trying to clear again? Or was he talking about saviors? You know what I mean? I'm not really sure exactly what he was talking about there. It wasn't really necessarily clear. I thought he meant saviors, but at the same time, looking back to season 3 and the whole clear Morgan and stuff like that, I'm kind of thinking it might have meant walkers, just I want to go out there, I want to kill every single last one of them, and, stuff like that. I thought that he might have meant walkers, but I don't think it's very clear on what he meant. Maybe he just meant either or, I have no idea, but either way, Carol ended up extending, his cottage, or her cottage rather, to him, basically saying, you can go and not go, and basically told him to stay at that cottage, just like she did, listening to him and listening to Ezekiel. She took this advice, from them. Now she wants him to take this advice from her, sort of like do it for me type of thing. And, he ends up doing it. He ends up staying there, and Carol ends up going to the kingdom, ends up talking to Ezekiel there while he was doing some gardening, and with Benjamin's little brother. Unfortunately, again, that's gotta suck for the little guy. It really does. He had a brother, and unfortunately, he's not alive anymore. Partly or all due to the saviors. Questionable it was to do with Richard, but anyways, with that being said, he was doing some gardening with him. Carol approached Ezekiel and basically said, I'm here now, and we have to get ready to fight. And this is when we finally get to find out that the kingdom is planning on joining, the fight, the war against Negan and the saviors, is because Ezekiel said, yes, we do, but not today. And then they sat down and did more gardening. It was all special and flowery, and it was really cool. But with that being said, that's the episode, everybody. That's in a nutshell, okay? And I just picked out pretty much the good parts that I really liked, and I hope that you guys did as well. You know what I mean? I really do. I thought this episode was probably one of the best of the season. I'm not saying it is the best of the season. It's one of the best of the season. I thought that it was really emotional, and especially the way Morgan took the lead in this episode. We're really used to seeing, Rick and, all the leaders of all these different communities leading the episodes, but Morgan is not really one to do it. This time he is. This time he did it, and he did it so well. And again, applaud to Morgan, man. The guy who plays Morgan, Lenny James, applaud to him, man. He's such a good actor. He really is. He definitely deserves more spotlight. I'll tell you that much. And I'm excited to see it, because Carol is now back. She's ready to fight. Hopefully she's back in full form, and, hopefully something doesn't happen after, maybe what happened in the comic books to Carol. I really hope not. But I got a feeling. I don't know. It might not happen. I hope that it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? But after she's done all this fighting that she doesn't want to do, something might. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you guys are a fan of the comic books and you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. And, she's doing something right now that she doesn't want to do, and that could force on some emotions. So I'm praying, man. I'm praying that it doesn't happen. But with that being said, everybody, that is today's, or last night's episode, rather, of The Walking Dead. This was my episode review of Season 7, Episode 13, entitled Bury Me Here. Make sure you guys tune in this Thursday for my episode review, or my episode predictions, rather, of Season 7, Episode 14, entitled The Other Side. All right? So this next upcoming episode is basically going to be on the hilltop, and Sasha and Rosita doing their mission to the sanctuary, trying to assassinate Negan. We'll see how that goes. Spoiler alert, they won't kill him, because that would be dumb. Honestly, that would be pretty stupid. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody.